Thank you for that question. Um, as I said before, this was a telephonic interview, which is limited in terms of the time you spend. So we spend a maximum of 30 minutes. Unfortunately, we were not able to get into details, but the little that we have, and from the report, some of the areas, citizens say that they are promoting good performance within KRA is on tax and enforcement. They think they are doing a good job. They offer fast services, so they have the mtandao. So citizens think that the online services maybe serve them well, and they are ready and they are prompt in terms of responding back. They help in economical development because of the role they have. They have a good customer service. That's also something that came as number 4. They provide quality services. And in terms of corruption, they are not corrupt. So Kenyans think that they do a good job, or they're not engaged in corrupt activities. They satisfied my needs, and their systems are easily accessible. So those are some of the areas Kenyans that contributed towards that positive rating among Kenyans on what KRA is doing. In terms of categories, whether they are in the informal sectors, so the findings don't include that, but if we are given chance, we can be able to dig deeper because the variables are there, and we can be able to categorize the findings to get to know in which area the rating is high and which area the rating is low. Probably those who are in the informal sector rate them highly, or those who are in the formal sector rate them highly compared to those who are in the informal sector. But basically, what we found that it's only 32% who have ever interacted with KRA, and I think that's also something that we can investigate further to get to know whether are they in the informal or informal sector. So more can be done. This was just a snapshot from the data.
So just to add in terms of taxation, why citizens probably, because I know many, the assumption was that citizens will come back and say, oh, KRA are just awful. But from where the finding sits, it seems like the citizen can be able to differentiate KRA as just a collector and an enforcer of the law, and then how the money is spent. So their biggest concern is actually not even the collection of that money. I mean, it's very clear they do understand that these taxes are needed. It's actually in the usage of that particular money where citizens are very dissatisfied. And you can see it's coming all the way from planning all through how the money is actually being spent on. So that accountability and transparency is where it's making this big gap between people willing to pay taxes and actually, I mean, wanting to interact more with KRA. And one of the things which we were actually discussing is should KRA be given a bigger role of being also just not a collector but an enforcer, and also somebody who can actually be able to demand more accountability. And of course there's an argument of, can the person who collects be the same person who also at the same time monitor and evaluate that? So there is that dilemma of the collector and then the user. So that is where probably we need to take a deep dive and decide what do we want to do.
Thank you. My name is Brian, and my concern is on the sample size. The sample size was 3,000. Is it possible in the future engagements with the citizen to increase the sample size? Because if you weigh it with the national population of around 48 million plus, it gives us a small percentage that we can generalize our conclusions and our data. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Allow me to take you back to Statistics 101. And based on the experience, I think this is the biggest sample we have ever used. In most cases, we have been using 2,000 and even below that. So statistically, a sample size of even 2,000 is sufficient. And I like you to go back to all the opinion polls that have been there before. It's rare to find a sample size even above 2,000. So statistically, a sample size of 3,000 is big. And the reason why we had even to do this is because we had interest on some sub-regions, like Nairobi, Mombasa, maybe the western zone, the region within Nairobi. So we can easily also aggregate this further and make inference. So it's good that you have asked that question, but in terms when you look at it statistically, a sample size of 3,000, because you have factored a lot of things, we had to stratify to ensure that this age group is represented and all that. And we have had cases where this was verified. For instance, in terms of polling and all that, although there have been some biasness in terms of presidential candidates and all that, choice and all that. But in most cases, whatever has been predicted based on a small sample size of like 2,000, eventually after voting and all that, it has been, although the changes or the difference were big, but not all that big. The same thing with what has happened in the US. They have been using a sample size of around 1,500 and eventually been able to accurately predict who will be the winner and all that. So if nothing happens in terms of sampling, because there's an aspect of randomness, representation, and if it's ensured, if the sample size is beyond 1,600, can sufficiently be able to use to inference on what's happening in the population. Thank you.
So, Risha, can they be able to join now? Some reaction from online. Do you have any questions there? In the chat, are there anything in the chat which you can read out? If they can hear us, then we can be able to just answer. Okay. Risha? Sorry, apology. We're trying to connect to our virtual members. Risha, I can see you smiling. Jen, can you hear us? So probably it's Risha's side. Jen is quiet. So radio silent there. Chat also. No, Jen, we can't. Let's the reactions. Yeah.
Any more reactions? Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Clive Ayuko. I wanted to ask of this sample size of 3,000, what was the response rate? Because I'm thinking not all the 3,000 actually filled this questionnaire to the very end. And perhaps a question, yeah, that's my question.
Okay.
Brian. Clive. So actually, in terms of the response rate, the strike rate, we had a strike rate of 85%. So we managed to call 4,500 respondents, and that is actually the final one, because we have an existing database of 150,000 panelists who we actually random call every other month or so. So it was actually a strike rate of 85%. It's a computer, it's CATI, computer assisted telephonic interview. So we have a computer and then we have the call. So all the responses actually goes back to be stored in a computer, on a hardware, and probably eventually in the cloud. So it's not like we have a phone or sending a message. This is a live telephonic computer assisted interview. And as James said, so to ensure robust and representation, we start from a baseline where we ensure every person countrywide is selected, and then from then now we go to the telephonic. As you know, a telephonic interview techniques has their own limitation, so you have to ensure that representation and then move to have that particular panel. So meanwhile, as we are waiting for the online, I thought probably if people want to share something which they thought is something new, I mean anybody wants to probably share something new, something which probably they disagree with, or something which they just was total out of the expectation.
Morning, my name is Susan from the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. So my question and the concern, because you said this data is used in policy formulation, was there a way of narrowing down and knowing whether the persons you're interviewing are persons with disabilities? Because I think we can agree that persons with disabilities, they have a unique set of challenges that that is unique, yeah, for them. So is there a way that you were able to narrow down? And if you were, I think it would be very important to get this data to help us even in terms of policy formulations and in terms of laws that can help make their lives better.
And I was trying to connect it to the fact that you have said only 32%.
Thank you, Susan. That's a very valid question, and I'm glad you asked it. So for this round, we didn't ask specifically to establish the disability for this particular round, but we've done a round on people with disability, and actually what we've established, like in our sample, we have almost up to 10 to 15% of people who have reported some element of them living with disability. So we can be able, I think probably we can exchange contact, and then we can be able to layer it to pull out. It's a small sample, but it's still indicative. So we can be able to pull out and just see the uniqueness, if they're any different from the to the general population, which the assumption is there will be. But I think there was some perception question on issue of disability, and if they're even aware of those special exemption which they tend to have both in disability. We've done the round in Makueni at the county level, which we actually managed to inform the county. The most positive part is that actually some action was taken based on that. So we can be able to share at least there at the county level, but even for this one, we can be able to layer it and pull out all those uniqueness to just for your interest. Thank you.
And out of those people who've interacted, almost all of them rate your services very highly. So you can, I think you can take a little more heart than you were having maybe initially. But I think some of the issues you raise about, who is it that's rating ARA well and who isn't, it's really, these are important questions, and we can certainly run that analysis for you. Let me see, I'm seeing from my colleagues that maybe we're being heard in the room now. Josiah, Melania, anyone in the room in Nairobi, can you confirm if you can hear us?
Yes, Risha, we can hear you. It seemed like there were two meetings running concurrently, but it's fine now. So I think probably, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, we were just getting bored because we couldn't engage, so we started talking to each other a little bit. My apologies.
Fine enough. We are doing fine here. So I think we have had some few reaction from this end. I've just told the people on the floor that anything which they think is a wow moment for them, anything which they thought this is not possible, I mean, really, this is beyond my expectation, or any finding which probably validated their perception or confirmed their reality. And I am still yet to see those reactions. So I think while people are still processing this, probably we can take it back to you, or probably we can invite our panelists to hear their reaction, then probably move from that juncture to something else. Risha? Risha, you need to unmute yourself. Risha?
Melania, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank God. I was
All right,
waiting.
my apologies. I was trying to reconnect back through the other system, but I think that's not going to work. So I'll connect through my computer audio. Really, I am on like 4 devices here. My apologies for all the issues.
Thank you. So to you. So probably you can take it from here.
Great, thank you. I was very sorry to miss some of those comments. It sounded like a very interesting discussion, but I've tried to capture some of them, and I know you'll brief me afterwards. So I think we can go straight into the panel discussion now. I'll need a bit of help to know who's online versus who's joining me from the floor where you are. So I've already had a little chat with Mr. Yeager. Mr. Yeager, I see you here online, so thanks so much again for being with us. I'm wondering if Irene Otieno is in the room.
Yes, she is.
Or online?
She is
Fantastic.
in the room. She is
I
on the
wonder,
floor.
Irene, if you wouldn't feel too bad sitting up at the front for us, just so we can have the mics to easy access. Can I also check for Kwame Owino? Is he around?
I think he must be
Online or in the room?
Online. Should be online. Because here we have Irene and Boke with us.
Yeah, I'm not seeing him. I haven't seen him actually at all online. Maybe I can ask Sarah or to see if she can check in with him. I'm also looking for Irene Boke.
She is. The 2 Irenes are here with us. They are on the floor.
Amazing. Thank you, Irene. I will have to find a way to distinguish between you as I'm asking questions. I'm also looking for Honorable Shakil. Now, just to let all of you know that Honorable Shakil and I were online first at about 9 a.m. exactly. So I did have a little chat with him. His intention is to join us, but my understanding is he has a bit of a technical glitch also. He's joining us from, I think, from far away, maybe from Egypt. So he may, he's facing a bit of challenge with that. So I'm really hoping we'll be able to get him back as we progress through our conversation, but I'm also conscious that I don't want to keep all of you waiting. We've had a few technical issues today, so I think let's just kind of march on if that's okay. So I think I'm confirmed with 3 out of my panel members. So I'd just like to give you guys a little introduction to who we have. As I said, we have Mr. Julius Yeager. He's from the Kenya Revenue Authority, has been there for 20 years, but he's also a teacher and a motivational speaker. I thought that was a nice combination of professions there. We have Irene Otieno. She's an advocate of the High Court, but also importantly, the national coordinator of the National Taxpayers Association, who were our partners in this round of data collection. So we're seeing these very exciting empty chairs. I'm hoping Irene Otieno and Boke will come and join us there. And then we have Irene Boke, who's in the Social Justice and Economic Accountability Program for Transparency International. We're so pleased to have all of you with us. Thank you so much for making time. Mr. Yeager, I know you're online with us, and I'm just looking to get some confirmation from the room that the Irene and Irene have made it up to the podium, as it were. Melania? Can you hear me? Sarah, Melania, somebody in the room?
Yes. We can hear you.
Right. So do we have Irene and Irene on the podium?
Yes, the two
I
Irenes
have
are
lost,
here.
unfortunately, Mr. Yeager.
Yeah. The two Irenes are here.
Yeah, could we get them on the stage? And then, I'm sorry I'm not able to do so, but perhaps Josiah or Sarah, you could help me to call Mr. Yeager, because he was right with us. We were having a great discussion while we were separated from you guys, and now I'm not seeing him online anymore.
The ladies are here. Okay, next
Yes,
one is
that's
here.
fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm leaving this task of following up with Mr. Yeager to Sarah or Josiah, please.
So
I hope that's
Risha,
noted.
while we're waiting for Mr. Yeager, it's
Yeah.
he actually also sent a rep. So Dixon, some of person from the office, his Dixon. So Dixon probably can come while, so he can be filling in while we're waiting for Yeager. So we do have somebody
Oh,
from the
great.
office.
Yeah, that would be fantastic if that's okay.
Yeah,
I don't want to surprise him.
yeah. So yeah, Dixon, karibu. This one we want to buffer you kidogo. Nixon, karibu.
Great. Oh, thank you so much,
So
Mr.
Nixon
Dixon,
is here.
for,
Yeah. So Risha, we have our three
allowing us-
people on the floor. So back to you.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well now. I know we've had some issues with this, but I want to be able to have a nice conversation with you guys. Again, thank you so much for making the time to join us. We're so pleased to have you and to be able to tap all of your expertises and insight on these data that we've just shared. So I'm just going to ask my first question to all of you. You can answer in the order that makes sense for you. What would you say kind of surprised you or caught your attention or interest about these data that we've just shared? Maybe I can go to Irene, who has a mic already.
Okay, yeah, that's better. Okay, so my name is Irene Boke. I work at Transparency International Kenya under the Social Justice and Economic Accountability program. It's a pleasure to be here and sharing in the data. I think I participated in the creation of some of the sample questions that we did interview on, and I'm glad that we finally gather here again to discuss the outcome or what has come out of it. So I think what struck me in the data that has been collected is, one is that, you know, contrary to, I think, general opinion, is that citizens are actually aware of their tax obligations and also some of the taxes that are there. But I feel like there was a number that, you know, wasn't really aware of some of the taxes, and I think this will be a task for the for the Kenya Revenue Authority in terms of just ensuring awareness on some of the taxes, because then if you have like 32% of the respondents engaging with Kenya Revenue Authority, what happens to the other 68%? Is it that they are not aware? Is it that they don't participate in taxation at all? And what happens? But also, every other bit, when we're talking about taxation or talking about state of the economy and also awareness of KRA, the thing that kept coming up is the quest for citizens' transparency, need for transparency and accountability. So I think also that struck me is it that we have very poor transparency and accountability mechanisms? Is it that really there is no participation from the government or feedback mechanism, like I think Dr. Sierra put it earlier, feedback mechanism from the government on some of these things. So I was happy that citizens are aware, and are also calling for some of these transparency and accountability measures, but I feel like the government needs to do more, and also the Kenya Revenue Authority in terms of awareness, as well as just being accountable to the citizens. So I think those are the two things that stood out for me. I saw them a bit constant throughout the data. Yeah, thank you, Roisha.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all that insight. Maybe just allow me a follow-up comment or question, if I may. It's interesting. I like the point that you make, that, you know, that there's a fairly high level of awareness of some of the taxes, and people know, citizens know about their tax obligations. But actually, if I'm not mistaken, the awareness of KRA as an institution is higher than awareness of any individual tax and of the taxes that you need to pay in general. So that's maybe some interesting food for thought in terms of moving forward. So a lot more people, or a fair few more people, know about KRA as an institution. Maybe I could move to Dixon from KRA. What was surprising for you? Or what caught your attention?
Thank you for that. It's Nixon.
Nixon, sorry, my apologies.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I think this is a very good study, and be assured that we look at it keenly and ensure that some of these study findings can also find their way into policy making and legislative proposals. Very important, I note that 2 out of 3 citizens are happy to pay taxes. You know, not very many people are happy paying taxes. So that is standing out for me. It means there's something different that KRA and the government is doing just to make taxes to be not as painful to Kenyans. And then I also realized that only a third are saying they have interacted with KRA. I think this one goes directly to my seniors, including Mr. Yeager Julius, that we need to interact with our taxpayers more, because we have a number of initiatives that we have implemented to ensure that our taxpayers are informed of their civic duties, their rights and obligations with respect to tax. Then I also realized that people are trying to evade tax because they feel the tax rates are too high. Not sure whether this is really a perception or it is real. Because if you compare the tax rates in Kenya versus many other jurisdictions, you'll realize that it's not one of the highest, taxed country. And then maybe I'll need a confirmation of what is underpaid. Is it the income earned by these respondents that is low, and that is why there's the propensity to evade? Or is it the tax that is underpaid? Maybe that is something that will need to be clarified. Something I realized in the study, if you look at the bulletins they have, there's a question on the taxes, on what citizens have interacted with KRA about. And it struck me on the second last item, on what services, on transfer of logbook. And I think 7 or so many years after this function was transferred to NTSA, many people still believe it's a function of KRA. So I don't know how KRA assisted this 1% in terms of transfer of logbook. So I think we need also a bit of education on that, so that our citizens know when they want to transfer their logbook or anything dealing with motor vehicles, apart from importing of those motor vehicles, is handled by NTSA. So allow me to leave it at that point, but I think this is a very good research, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Nixon. I appreciate that insight. Allow me to just ask you a little follow-up question. It's true that 2 out of 3 citizens say, they would pay, actually, and many of them say they would pay without enforcement for taxes, but at the same time, you do have some of these kind of potentially contradictory perceptions where people are saying that taxes are so high that avoidance is almost essential for survival, and comments like this. And then I think that also speaks to what you were saying about, people being underpaid. I think perhaps before you arrived, we were watching some videos where people, market traders were kind of saying, if I'm on a daily basis earning 200 shillings or 500 shillings, what tax am I really supposed to pay out of that? And so maybe there's something to be said about, we have these low earner tax brackets, in a certain amount of your income is not chargeable on tax. Maybe that's something to think about. I don't know how you feel about that. And also, I think a bit of a comment on, yes, there's a willingness to pay, but there's also a willingness to avoid. And it seems that citizens are living in a bit of a a bit of a contradictory space there, and I wonder what your reflections were on that.
Very true, and very good sentiments. That what we're happy about is that Kenyans are willing to pay tax. They know the role of tax in the economy. They know why we need to pay tax to the government. But we also have that clique that feel if they are able to avoid tax, then they will do so at the earliest opportunity. And I'm also happy in the same survey, this research shows us that citizens are also aware that KRA does enforcement of the taxes. So what I don't know is whether those who are willing to evade also know the implication of evading tax, and whether KRA can catch up with them at a later time to enforce such kind of practices. So I think that would be my comment for now on that.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nixon. We'll come back to you. Sure. Irene Otieno, please tell me what surprised you or caught your interest.
Thank you, and I'm very pleased to be here today. From the data that was collected, my concern looks at the interplay between the data that has been shared that points to the fact that corruption has been increasing, but we also see that citizens are still positive in saying that they would and are willing to pay taxes. So my question then becomes, or my point in terms of just trying to understand this data is, how then does KRA, and even as a country, that yes, we have this potential that we need to plug in, that is the goodwill from citizens to pay taxes. But within that context, the corruption levels have gone high. So are we really adding to anything in terms of expanding the tax bracket? Because you're expanding the tax brackets, you're trying to reach a larger group. There's potential for people who are avoiding or evading to now say we will pay. But equally, we are seeing that the corruption is increasing. So that for me is an issue that would then continue to affect the revenue collection from KRA. So that is one. My second information that I think was also very useful is the fact that citizens view that their feedback on particularly the finance bills, the development of those finance bills and policy is not taken on board. So probably to be able to query, because as civil society players, we have been giving submissions to the committee when they are looking at these bills. We also have noted that some of these are not taken on board. So when is it really an issue of what citizens want versus what the political undercurrents are? Because some of the proposals that have been put forth by KRA are very progressive, and some of them, when you look at the finance bill, is what the African tax associations are actually moving towards. So you'll find a lot of African tax administrators or revenue administrators have consensus that there is a need to tax this type of a product, or bring on this tax raising measure. But when it comes then to the committee and parliament, you find that those very progressive elements are not taken on board. Mainly it's obviously because of how will the electorate take it, what would this mean for my votes. So where do we put a balance between what would be political suicide for the politicians, but very progressive for us as a country as revenue raising measures? So those for me are areas that I think we need to look at if we want to improve revenue in our country, and equally also continue maintaining that high motivation of taxpayers to pay tax. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene. Really insightful. I'm seeing that we have got Mr. Yeager back, Julius Yeager, here with us. So I was just going around asking our panelists, and we have a colleague of yours also in the room, Nixon. We're just wondering what surprised you, or what kind of caught your attention in these data. And I know you and I had a bit of a conversation, but I'd love for the whole room, virtual and physical, to be able to hear from you. Karibu sana. Mr. Yeager, Julius Yeager, do you hear me? There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm getting you loud and clear, but for now I'll not be able to have any comment at the moment. just that we talked about earlier online. The bit that has impressed me is the fact that taxpayers are of real positive view of KRA employees. Yeah, we have really been trying to fight corruption, and I'm happy that they are able to indicate from the research that KRA officers are not corrupt. That to me is very positive. The bit that somebody raised on earlier on, which I think is critical to us, is that which sector of taxpayers are very concerned or are happy with our performance. We did discuss that earlier on online, but it would be very important for us as people who do or give capacity building. It's going to be very important for us in terms of what kind of strategy are we going to adopt to ensure that we reach so many of them out there who we are not able to reach at the moment. And then the percentage of 32 speaks volumes to us. That tells us that a lot need to be done so that we are able to reach more people outside there. And I'm very glad that you're with my colleague, Mr. Nixon Omondi, who is in the house. And he will take you through so many of those aspects that you'd want to know. I'm saying this because I'm on two areas, but for now, I'm very happy with the progress that's going on. And thanks so much for comment from Madam Irene. Yeah, we really are in that dilemma. We really want to say that if the political system would be able to do a lot of also what I would call informing the taxpayer of their rights and all that, that would be very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yeager. Thank you. We appreciate your input. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point that you've made, Irene, around the kind of progressive administrators versus potentially regressive politics. I'm going to rephrase you slightly. So maybe I could go to you, Nixon, to say, what do you think is the role that KRA can play in really kind of helping to balance these two potentially competing areas? You know, that what works for us as a country in terms of the tax regime and is perhaps fairer to citizens versus some of the imperatives that push our politics. What role can you play in helping to kind of mediate between those two opposing forces?
Yeah, true. I know it's not an easy call, because we are also subject to the political class. We are creation of the political institutions. And what KRA has been doing, and maybe we just need to do it more, is to continue with education and awareness. Many a time we actually take some of the parliament committees through taxation regimes, including maybe before the finance bill is brought to the fore, on why we would wish to have a change in law in one way or another. So that we need to continue, because...
Sorry, I'm having a bit of an issue, Nixon, with music again.
Sorry.
Okay, this is not our day on Zoom. I can't tell where the music is coming from. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Fine. So I was saying we as KRA...
Can you hear me, Nixon?
Yes, I hear you. Are you able to get me? Are you able to get me now?
Yes, now I've got you.
Good.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. So what I was saying is we have continually endeavored to train the legislature, because not everyone is a tax expert. They might not be looking at some of the policy rationale through the same lens that those who are technical in tax matters would be looking at them. So when we have a conversation with them, then they understand where we are coming from and where we need to move our country to. So that partnership in terms of training and understanding one another is what we'll continue doing. Two, I think we also need input from our principals, that is our ministry, because they are closer to the political class. I know they always also talk to the political class just to ensure that they understand why some laws are supposed to be changed in that manner. So there's a lot to be done, But we need collaboration with our taxpayers. Actually, we now say that taxation is not about, this law says this and therefore this is how we need to follow. But we try to collaborate with our taxpayers, and that's why you see in this research, taxpayers are very happy with KRA. They understand the roles of KRA. I see they are enumerated very well. And that means well for our country. Because we believe in KRA that an informed citizenry is generally a tax-compliant citizenry. So the more our citizens, our legislature understand our role, and that all the policies that we propose mean good for our country, then I think we'll be moving in the right direction together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nixon. Loads of insight from that. I didn't know that you did trainings with the legislature, so that's fascinating to know. Maybe I'm just going to go back to Irene Otieno for a moment, if that's okay, since you raised this issue. We often find in our work in different areas, actually, that you can sometimes see this type of alliance between the citizens and sort of what I want to call kind of technical people, technocrats, involved in kind of getting things done in government. And then you highlighted, sometimes the political class can be a bit disconnected from that. So what do you think could be the role of organizations like yourselves, NTA, and civil society more broadly in kind of trying to help bring this perhaps alliance closer together, because perhaps it creates greater pressure if you have citizens and technocrats speaking the same language and pushing towards the same ends in some ways, and also in terms of just helping to further the agenda of moving away from sort of politicized decision making around such a critical issue as our tax regime.
Yeah, I was changing the mics. I think the other one has a bit of a problem. So to answer, or in terms of, to attempt to answer that question, or that observation, I think the important thing of institutions such as ourselves, and I sit here as the national coordinator of National Taxpayers Association, and also sitting in the board of Tax Justice Network Africa. So by virtue of being part of Tax Justice Network, we then have opportunity to see what are the tax issues happening within our continent as a whole. So there, and I think with ATAF that the Revenue Authority works closely with, you are then able to access pieces of research that would also guide our advocacy as civil society players. So one, and I think when we are sitting here, it's not for us to attempt to say we are experts around taxation. For instance, my institution is keen around just the connection between taxes and services, which we have seen as a critical concern of citizens, that we are still, the reason why they would want to avoid or evade tax is when services are poor. So we exist simply as an institution to join together the fact that tax should ordinarily translate into services. So when you do not have this, what then happens? And there comes the fact that we as an institution, not being tax experts proper, then have opportunity to access pieces of research undertaken. That's why the Twaweza partnership with NTA was very critical, because their strength is in research. Our strength comes in being in spaces with other organizations that do advocacy around tax. So we then have the benefit of looking at tax regimes within Africa, and then how does that inform our own context. So what then I see as a critical space that institutions such as NTA occupy is to share this data and research with the policymakers. So how is this progressive for taxpayers or not? How would this make life easier for taxpayers? I would give an example of the capital gains tax, and Nixon being the main players would be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I think the first the issue around capital gains is we were saying what the data here says, we need to tax the people who have more than the mamamboga, the mwananchi, the me. I would also want to say I'm not a really, up there. So someone like Irene, who doesn't want to feel the pinch. So who else will you tax so that you can be able to reduce the burden of taxation on Irene? So we felt capital gains is one area, because these are people that are trading either in real estate, there is land and everything like that. So there was a proposal in the finance bill that this should be taxed at 12%. So we as civil society players came together, and that is something that we submitted and told Parliament. That is progressive because the research we have shared today shows that taxes have potential to either address inequality or perpetuate inequality. So here we have capital gains that we are thinking, if KRA is now saying, and as a country we are saying we want to tax the informal sector, which means all small players, we are bringing them in the net, why are you then not addressing these higher ones up? But we observed that Parliament, I think, approved it at 5%. Yeah? So we felt that such a policy move was not very progressive and would still perpetuate inequalities. I know the committee shared their reasons behind that. And so I'm just bringing that to show the value of institutions such as the NTA. It would be able to just start and ignite those conversations. So we are at 5%, but can we share more evidence? What are other countries doing? Because at the end of the day, remember, we have also shared research that shows we need to have a country that is competitive. How do we ensure that people are coming to invest here? How do we ensure that cost of production, and I noted that the cost of inputs, the cost of running business was a critical thing that was a concern to businessmen. So we then need to balance this. So a space that I see that is very useful, and I find value in the fact that the Revenue Authority is highly represented both in this meeting and also virtually, that they are willing then to say, we do not look at civil society players, the media, as people who are not tax experts, but we can be able to bring the lived and the daily reality, that probably because the data has shown a small percentage of citizens have interacted with KRA, but we in our space interact with citizens on a daily basis. So we bring that value add to this space to the policy makers that, hey, these are the people behind us, and these are their sentiments around taxation. So that would be my comment to that observation. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a really nice point. You know, you're looking for, in a sense, you're looking to advocate to the politicians and to a certain extent actually to KRA, and you can bring them into your spaces where the people that they want to reach are. I like that a lot. Thank you so much. Let me go to your sister, Irene. I would love to hear your thoughts, given your role, on why do you think the public perceive that the current tax regime has increased inequality? Where does this idea come from? Do you think it's justified? And maybe what could we do to address that? Because I think as Irene Otieno now has been saying, you know, there is, of course, taxes can do both, perpetuate or improve on inequality. But there's a sense, I think it's something like half of Kenyans are saying, well, actually, we think our tax regime has increased inequality. So I'd love to hear some reflections from you on that.
Okay, thank you, Risha. I think that is a really interesting question that I thought I saw come out quite heavily, because if I think, was it 48% of respondents are saying that the tax system that we have has actually increased inequality, and just like Irene said, it has that ability to increase or, you know, sort of curb that inequality gap. But the way I see it is sort of tenets of a proper tax system, from where I see it, is a tax system that perpetuates equity over equality. Yeah, you know, equality is where we are all given the same opportunity, but equity is where, for if I have maybe fewer or little benefit over my friend here, Nixon, then my tax capability should be lower compared to what Nixon has to pay. So it's the ability, or sort of the distribution of taxes amongst citizens. So I think when you perpetuate an equitable tax, or as a tax system that looks at equity over equality, then that is able to address that. Because then in that way there is, do we call it the horizontal equity, and then there's the vertical equity. For instance, the horizontal, all the people that are paid within the same pay grade, or receive the same benefits or services, then pay the same equal tax. But there are people who are higher in their maybe pay grades or even other benefits, then those ones should be considered in a vertical kind of equity, where now their taxes should not be the same as the taxes that the common citizen pay. Take, for instance, the VAT. VAT is cuts across. It's 16%, whether it doesn't really matter what you earn or who you are. So we all pay the same amount of tax on that. Yet there are people who have the ability to pay more, and there are people who cannot even afford that. 16% is too high for them, yeah? So is our tax system really equity, looking at equity? Is it a citizen-geared kind of tax system? Or do we just care about what the government is collecting at the end of a financial year? What are we putting in front? And also looking at some other tax systems. For instance, multinational corporations get tax breaks for like 10 years, yeah? Yet you have this citizen that you continuously tax each year. There's payee, there's VAT, there's all these form of taxes that are considered on one person. So how does that speak to it? So when I look at that and look at this statement, I'll tell you, you are taxing at a little too high, yeah? Can you reduce? So it's really sort of neither here nor there situation, so I can't say if it's justified or not. But I think what can be done to address, so I look at this from sort of a government perspective as well as a citizen perspective. And some of the things that kept coming up even in the survey is the need for transparency and equality. Citizens are really calling for government to, let us see what these taxes are doing. We are happy to pay taxes, yeah? And I think even KRA has noted that, 2 out of 3 people saying, yes, I'm happy to pay taxes, whether it's enforced or not, I know my obligation as a citizen. But the problem is I do not see where those taxes are going. And I think that is the very heavy part that government needs to play. Be accountable to the citizens for the amount that they're giving you. It's quite demoralizing. I'm paying every other year, but I'm still receiving the same poor medical services. The things remain constant. So that does not reflect the amount of taxes that we pay. But I'm also looking at, apart from transparency and accountability, from the government perspective and perhaps the KRA perspective, does the Revenue Authority have the capacity, both human and technical, to enhance some of these taxes that are not normally the VAT, the constant taxes that are easy to collect because the mechanism has been already set. There are other more complex taxes that property tax for instance, yeah, that can be imposed and could even gather more revenue compared to these small constant taxes that we keep deepening and deepening. Can we widen our tax base rather than continuing the deepening of that tax base? Because we are continuing hurting the same people and taxing them severally over the same thing. Can we have alternative modes of revenue collections? Are we looking at other forms like property taxes? And in that case, does then the Kenya Revenue Authority have the capacity, both human resource and also the technical capacity, to enhance some of these taxes or to enforce some of these taxes, for instance, in the extractive sector? I think it's a sector that has potential, but we don't see the return on should I say investment, because we do not see how much is returning really in terms of revenue collection. The collection on that sector is a bit too low, yet I think personally it has the potential to do more. And then finally, I'm also looking at things like corruption, illicit financial flows, other forms of tax evasion. How are we have we sealed these loopholes, to ensure that the resources that we have within Kenya actually remain within Kenya and they're not shipped abroad for other purposes, for instance, through corruption or money laundering. These all things come up when you're talking about taxation. Then how do we ensure that we seal this loophole so that we reduce the burden of VAT and all these other taxes that we put on informal sector mostly, or the common citizen? Then if we seal these loopholes and enhance our domestic resource mobilization efforts, I think that we'll be able to relieve a little bit of the burden that is on the citizens right now. What we are facing and why we are saying it's unequal. Let us look at things like taxing the multinational corporations. Let us look at taxing some of these real estate where, we invest all across. I think it's been highlighted so many times how much Nairobi tycoons are investing in South Sudan, in, all these other countries. We are literally taking up the real estate market in East Africa. So how are we able to tax some of those situations and relieve a little bit of the burden of the Monanchi? So I think that is my response, Risha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene. I think, I hope Mr. Nixon will certainly send you some of the list of suggestions that Irene has made. I thought there was a really interesting point. Maybe just to kind of pick up on a couple of things, I think, the idea that we need services to feel that our tax is justified, I think that also comes out very strongly. And I just wanted to kind of draw attention to, I think this is a well-touted example, but, often in kind of Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, you're looking at tax rates that are incredibly high, even just on sort of payee income tax, which obviously applies to more people probably than it does in our context. But you're looking at rates of well over 50-60%, and yet people are largely happy to pay those tax rates because they really do feel that the services are taken care of, education all the way to university, good free healthcare, all of these things. So I think that's a really important call. And I know, of course, as KRA, you don't have, the full mandate over that, but we hope you can play a role to kind of get this message out that as much as when government is introducing new mechanisms by which to collect money from citizens, there needs to be a sort of commiserate, level of delivery, and that people need to have the perception that delivery is happening. I wanted to go back to you, Nixon, if it's okay to just reflect a little bit, because as I was listening to Irene's proposals potentially of how we can address this issue of inequality and equity, it struck me that it feels that there may be a bit of a tension, and you can tell me if you think I'm wrong, between this idea where we do want to widen the tax base, we don't want to just hit the same people over and over again, but at the same time, often when you're looking at progressive rates of taxation, you do end up really hitting quite hard, or really going for the people who are in certain groups and in certain potentially social classes. And I'm struck here by examples we have in Tanzania, if you'll allow me to bring a couple. So a few years ago, there was introduced a kind of informal vendor ID. We call it the Machinga ID. So if you were kind of in the informal sector, you would just pay annually a flat rate of 20,000 shillings. That's about, $6, let's say. And then that would be it. You would not, you're not supposed to be asked for any further kind of payment to the government. And I don't think there's been any, proper assessment of what that achieved, how much increased revenue it brought in versus the kind of dismay and unhappiness that came from it, where people were unhappy. As we say, people are often unhappy to pay tax. And another space in which this happens in Tanzania is in mobile phones, right? Everybody has many of us have mobile phones and SIM cards. And so there was a proposal in 2013 to introduce a flat tax of 1,000 shillings a week. At that time, I think that was still just around $1 or maybe just under. And that was really, really fiercely opposed. And we did some research actually into that to show that that was about a week's worth of airtime spending for the poorest households. So yeah, Nixon, just to reflect on sort of widening the tax base versus progressive taxes, and how do you at KRA kind of navigate that difficult space?
Thank you. In the current world, we are saying, after dealing with BEPS issues, more so taxation of the digital economy, our next frontier is taxation of the informal economy. And I hope you are going to see that discussion very soon. I agree with you, I agree with Irene, that government usually is at dilemma. It's at crossroads on how do we have a responsive tax system that follows economic models and economic changes, and as well productive enough to get the government revenue so that the government can provide services. That mix is what we call the kizungu mkuti, how to get there. We know that a progressive tax system should have the tenets as dictated by Adam Smith, fairness and neutrality, or what we call equality, that you tax people in similar circumstance, in a similar manner. The government wants to give incentives, especially to the low-income earners, so that we tax the rich more. That looks a bit of an old word, and then we lower the tax burden to those who do not earn more. You remember Kenya introduced turnover tax at 1% in April 2020, and that is in a bid to take care of the small business person, the trader, in a manner that it's affordable, it is simple to administer, and it doesn't increase the cost of collecting tax. Another principle we are now thoroughly thinking about in KRA is to lower administration cost of taxes. We want you to comply at the lowest cost possible. You see a number of reliefs we all appreciate, especially for the salaried. We had some reprieve due to COVID last year, those measures. And that is still going into trying to have a tax system that has equality a tax system that will collect more from those who have and give those who do not have enough time or enough money to reinvest, because we know that when a lot of money is left in the hands of the citizens, it goes back to the economy and it comes back to the government as tax. We're also trying as much as possible to modernize our laws. Remember, we are, like, if you look at the Income Tax Act, you know that is an act that was done in 1973, and it was effective from 1st of January 1974. You know, the economic models then, the circumstances of Kenya then have since changed. And that's why we've sung all of our, for a number of years now, that we want to look at that law so that we make it to be more modern and responsive to the current economic situations. You saw we modernized VAT law, the Tax Procedure Act, and all those ones. Now, coming direct to your question and the comment on the way Tanzania had come up with the vendor ID and simplification of taxes to these small people. You remember in Kenya, 3 or 4 years ago, we had presumptive income tax, where the government had suggested that for those small traders, all you needed to do is to pay tax at the point you are going to pay for your single business permit. And I think that was very simple. But because of 1 or 2 issues, it did not take up properly. So we went back to the turnover tax, which I still believe is simple, maybe cheaper to tax people, and also administratively will not require a lot of processes. So that is in the same vein of simplification of taxes to the common mwananchi and to the informal sector. What you've mentioned on taxation of mobile phones, tax must have a basis. You don't want to tax somebody simply because there's a flow of money. That flow of money must be backed up by some economic fundamental. So and that is why in Kenya, if it is TOT, we are looking at you having earned an income. If it is VAT, there must be a basis of consumption, but each country have their own policies and why they are bringing up such policies. But we appreciate that the government is trying as much as possible to have a tax system that will increase inequality. I like some of the comments that came from the survey, that there was this question on whether the tax system favors the most established entities or companies or organizations, and you can see yes are very low, 14%, meaning Kenyans have faith in the current tax system, even as we seek to make it much more responsive to the economic situation. But I wanted to urge our civic organizations, the taxman and maybe the ministry and Parliament might not have all the ideas on how to make this tax system to be very responsive and to perpetuate, to ensure that there's equality in our economy. Most of the citizens do not know how to undertake public participation. Yes, it is in law, it is a requirement. A number of organizations, I like NTA, TI, I know you are doing that. But the common man does not know how to forward their proposals on how we can better our systems. So I will challenge maybe our civic society to take up, that space and educate our citizens on how do you take part in a budget making process, for example. Can you make your proposal, whether it will be taken into consideration or not, but your voice shall have been heard. Because what I know is whenever any proposal has been forwarded either to KRA or the National Treasury, you must get feedback as to why it was not taken into consideration. And it is better when it is taken into consideration. And a number of these initiatives have been taken in because we find them to be very valuable, and actually some are very well thought out. So that is a challenge to the civic society. I don't know if I've addressed all your questions, our coordinator. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Really, really insightful. Sorry, I was busy scribbling that down. And just to your last point, it's great that you said that, because that was actually going to be what I came back to you with, is that, you know, if people aren't getting feedback on the proposals they make, then it can be really challenging for them to continue to kind of make those proposals or provide feedback. So maybe that's something we'll try to look into in further rounds. I've taken a lot of time, so I'm wondering if maybe any of our online participants or in the room would like to ask any questions or make any comments. So Melania, also back to you in some way. I'm not seeing any hands up online. Please, colleagues, if you would like to say anything, please use the raise hand function or unmute yourself. And I see we've been joined by Honorable Kipchumba. Karibu sana.
Thank you for the opportunity. My concern is with citizen participation, because as I said before, we have conducted a survey to get to know why citizens do not participate fully in is not prioritizing in these processes. Now, as KRA, okay, we, in terms of the draft and development of bills that you have come up with and taken to the parliament, do you think there are loopholes into which the politician can take part or be able to drive the process? Because basically the problem is politician getting into the process because they have their own selfish interests. Allow me to use such kind of expression. Do you think there is a way we can be able to curb this? Because if we are able to address it, I think citizens will participate more, because the less they get to see that their voices are not heard, the more they'll be discouraged to participate in these activities.
We'll collect a few questions, right? If that's okay. Maybe up to 3, and then give a chance for response. Melania, have somebody who's written one on the chat if you're not having anyone else in the room.
So I will, and then probably can have somebody on virtual, the one on chat. So to me, it's Nixon, I think, and also Irene, the both Irenes. Because there've always been this argument of when I win progressive tax, that people always complain that you are taxing me, you're punishing me for working harder, for being an entrepreneur. I mean, that dilemma, how do you balance that dilemma of, you know, the more income I make, I mean, I'm supposed to be incentivized for making more money, not for you now to take it for me. Then probably all of us should be lazy or sit back so that we don't get the tax. So how do we ensure that, you know, how do we even message that element that, you know what, it's your civic duty and you know, you're just giving it back, as opposed to that feeling that I'm being punished because, you know, it's my hard work. It's not like the government gave me this money or something like that. Thank you. So Risha, I think we will go to you.
All right,
I think the floor, yeah.
Can I invite, thank you, can I invite Ochi B to speak your question, if that's okay? I see you put it in chat, but we'd love to hear from you directly.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is most organizations and senior people in government and some professions like the legal profession, they hide behind that word of tax avoidance, and they don't pay taxes on many things that they do, and that affects the base for us getting enough taxes, or getting the net for the base for taxes in our country, or on income. So how can we legally close that gap between on ensuring that everybody pays taxes? And my next question is about there is so much good effort that KRA makes to to increase the tax base and the net for collecting taxes. But then we have that same energy of ensuring that the taxes are put into good use to provide the citizens with the services and goods that they require. So that's my two questions.
Thank you so much, Ochi. So Melania, let's go back to our panelists and please feel free to answer any of the questions or comments that came out.
Okay, so Nixon said ladies first. Okay, I appreciate the questions. I think I can address, before I address any, let me just say something on public participation because I feel it comes out quite strongly. Our constitution, yes, provides for public participation, but I think the part that is missing in implementation is effective public participation, not just public participation for the sake of public participation, yeah? I don't know if or how many of you have attended any public forum, especially on finance or budgets. So I'm not seeing, okay, I see about two hands in a crowd of almost 20 people. So I'm thinking that is one instance. And then there is always this issue of the complexity of the financial, even terminologies and processes. Even I, up to now, working in the social and economic accountability sector, I still struggle with some of the financial words, terminologies, processes. I still do struggle, yeah? Yet this is the thing that I do every other day. So I'm imagining a common citizen, like right at the village, yeah? You're telling them to participate on some of these issues without giving them the capacity first. Yeah, and I know we've been taxed as civil society on the capacity of citizens in some of these processes. But I'm also thinking our governments are very funny. They will go with the document this bulky, yeah, for public participation on, say, a morning of from around 9 a.m. in a hall a quarter to the hall that we're sitting in right now, and call it constituency public participation. Question is, how many people are going to come? Number one, how have you done the mobilization? Number two, how have you simplified some of this information that you're carrying, the very bulky and technical information that you're carrying for public participation, so that citizens can actually participate, yeah? And participate effectively. And then even the size of the room, there's so many things that I think preliminarily need to be considered before you can say that you have done effective public participation. But also, are we giving citizens sort of an opportunity to even monitor some of these projects that we're doing? If you're saying that we're budgeting for a road in, say, Kuria East constituency, where I come from, and that road, it's, of course, people do not really understand how it comes about or what they want, but some, maybe for them, they need a school more than they need the road, or they need a hospital more than they need the thing that you're budgeting for. Are you really, because then that, in that case, nobody will care to look at how far is this road, how is it working, is it really taking in the money that was budgeted for? Nobody will care because their immediate need was not considered. Now that is the challenge or the problem of public participation. If we do not do effective public participation, we are never going to have audits, citizen audits on some of these projects that we are bringing up. And it will be looked at from the citizen perspective as our concerns were never taken up. And that is exactly how it sits. So I think the importance here is not really just having a blank check of public participation stamped, we did public participation. Is how effective was that public participation? Do citizens in that constituency really understand what they were participating on? And are they able to even monitor and evaluate the projects that have come up in that from that public participation? So I think the stress for me will be effective public participation rather than just general public participation. So, but I leave the other part of the question on the role of KRA on that to be answered by my colleague Nixon. The issue of should I use the term taxing the rich more? I think this comes up majorly. I've heard of it heavily on wealth tax. Remember the tax where I think, is it millionaires are taxed a certain percentage? It has been really discussed at large because someone will say, I paid taxes all along the process of me acquiring this wealth. And you still want to tax me a wealth tax on that, the same amount that I've been paying tax constantly together. So is that really fair? And does it fall under double taxation because I paid taxes before acquiring all this wealth that I have, and now you want to tax the very same wealth? So I don't know the fairness of it, how it comes about, but in my thinking, or from where I sit and what I said earlier is I could encourage a more equity kind of system where, you know, people within the same tax bracket, within the same economic or social brackets are taxed the same, but people in a different economic brackets, then their taxes are considered differently or higher than the people on a more smaller level or lower level of social setup. Because then in that way, you know, this person, you're sort of distributing your what can I call it, national burden of taxation, because this person can pay their fair share of tax, and it will not harm them either way, and you will pay what you can afford, because some of these tax can look impunitive depending on the magnitude of it and also the frequency that someone has to pay. Because if it's something that I'm paying every other time I buy something, or every other time I pay for a service, then it might look more frequent and more punitive than any. Accountability, there's a question on tax avoidance. Can I leave that to KRA? Because I think there's, it's a bit hard to monitor or tax illegal activities, because the illegal nature of it, you won't know they're happening, yeah? It's like saying accounting for illicit financial flows. The illicit aspect of it is hard to even track in the first place. So how can you say that you're taxing that part which you don't have the mechanism to first identify that these are loopholes? I think it's the same case with tax avoidance. Tax avoidance, you're basically going around the law to avoid paying that tax that you ought to pay. So I think it's legally provided because you ought to pay that tax. It's only that people are going around or using legal loopholes to avoid paying that tax. So I think it's more of an enforcement mechanism than how do you enforce that, because it's, if you're going around the law, then there must be sort of lacunas within the law. How do you seal those or enforce that, implement that collection of that part of the tax? So I think it's more of an implementation or enforcement issue rather than a legal issue, really. Yeah, I think it's more implementation. And then accountability of taxes, I think this is what the entire survey is all about. We are paying, yes, we're happy to pay, but we're not seeing the services in return. Then how do we look at that? And I think that is the role of government, really, to ensure that citizens get, or the government is accountable to the taxes that are being paid by citizens, because you can't keep paying for something, but you're not seeing the thing that you're paying for. So I think that is the challenge that comes out throughout the survey, and if you look at it, you'll see it coming out every other aspect of it, yeah? In terms, when people say, you know, we don't have jobs, it's always about how, then why are we paying the taxes? What are the taxes going to do? If we don't have service delivery, like for instance, in the health sector, what are the taxes going to do that we're paying? Yes, we're happy to pay, but what are the taxes doing? So I'll leave it at that and hand over to Nixon.
Thank you. Allow me to just add one or two things, because my colleague Irene has covered them sufficiently, but I'll only speak to a small extent on... I'll only speak to a small extent on the issue of professionals and how they're avoiding. I just want to speak on the issues of the lawyers and the legal profession, in terms of them being facilitators, not avoiding themselves, but being facilitators of those illegal funds. I had noted that KRA is now saying they need third-party agents to be able to share information on income that people are getting. So I, as a tenant, would be able to give a bit of who my landlord is. So in the same vein, I think they wanted to find out, can the lawyers also contribute to know in terms of the client's money that they are holding? But the lawyers have fought this on the issue of client and advocate confidentiality. So to that extent, I think some professions have been used to avoid and tax avoidance, tax evasion. And so this is a conversation, I think, as a country, if we can be able to get the rough estimate of how much amounts does KRA or is Treasury thinking is being lost in that way, then have conversations with the Law Society of Kenya look within other jurisdictions, because that is client advocate confidentiality is one principle that is known everywhere. But how are other countries addressing it, so that we know as a country, are we chasing something that is impossible, and what would be the negative impacts of this? So the one for the lawyers is the one that comes to mind, because I have seen the issues the Auditor General has had with Nairobi County, that a specific law firm has been used to swindle the county of a lot of money, but then the KRA, the government cannot be able to access some of this information because of that. So I think this is one area that we really need to look at, the role of professionals on just not tax avoidance, but even corruption. Because as an institution, we do a lot of scorecards. So if you look at the scorecards that we have developed, you find that engineers and surveyors are the ones who have approved what they call, is it the BQs, or have approved even the completion certificate. So you see, this is not something that me and you can do without the help of a profession. So I think there's a need to speak not just to citizens generally, but can we have these professional associations and start talking to them on the net impact of corruption and what they are facilitating by virtue of the professions that they are holding. So if you as an accountant facilitate loss of so many billions, it means KRA will be chasing a smaller person, while your client would have been able to provide this and still be able to live a comfortable life. So that for me is a bit of an observation, and maybe Nixon will add on what progress they've made on the lawyers thing, or that has already been overtaken by events. James mentioned, I don't know whether it was James, and someone also mentioned here, that a lot, the petitions and submissions that we as civil society put out there, are they really getting, the results that we want? We have also observed, I think as civil society players, it's good to take stock and agree on the good advice, I think, that also Nixon has pointed out to us. Where are our gaps? We are quick to point out gaps the government and the entity have, but we also need to look in-house. What I have noted is government would also dismiss some submissions by NTA and by TI. So who is behind TI? TI doesn't have a constituency, a huge one. NTA doesn't have a huge constituency as we want. But if you have Juakali Association writing that submission, so NTA has told them, this is what is in the finance bill, this is the net impact. But now the memo has the NTA logo, probably because of a bit of technical issues, but also joined with the Boda Boda or the Juakali Association. Boda Boda are huge. If they decide to stop things in Nairobi, we are practically not moving goods and people. So I think it is important that we as civil society stop being gatekeepers and open the doors. I'm happy that the National Council of People Living with Disabilities is here today, because we have, as NTA, now taken 3 associations. We are working with the Boda Boda Association, I think Juakali, and Umoja Disability Group. So we want the memos now. We can actually go behind. I think I like making reference to the Bible. When John the Baptist, is it John the Baptist that says, the disciples came in and are saying that John the Baptist is stealing the show. The response from Jesus was, John the Baptist, I think the issue was, Jesus is now taking over the crowd. So John the Baptist, his response was, it's my joy to fade away, while Jesus comes to the fore, because he's the main deal, he's the real deal. So equally for us as civil society, it's a privilege that we can capacity build citizens to the level that our logo does not have to appear on a submission, but the strength of the capacity building of the community is what holds water. Because at the end of the day, I don't have a vote as National Taxpayers Association, but the Juakali Association has numbers behind it. So if we can be able to switch a bit and have our submissions, having these people at the core of these conversations, that would be able to kind of dilute the influence that politicians have. So that is something we've started. I don't know how that will play out. I also want to add the observation I've seen with the judiciary of late. I don't know what KRA feels, but 2 or 3 of their revenue measures have been declined. I think they are not being implemented because of these decisions from judiciary. So that is also a space that we need to look at. When the politicians are not hearing us, is there value to then litigate? And what type of information are we getting from the litigation? The only downside I saw, particularly I think on the minimum tax, is minimum tax has happened in other jurisdictions in Africa. So how has that happened? While the same issues are what? we and Kenya Association of Manufacturers are against here in Kenya. So I think judiciary is also a space that we need to look at, and I'll also add a bit of a question to Nixon to say, are they seeing a gap? Is judiciary seeing the point of the revenue we are looking at, or are they just looking at the procedural issues and saying there was no public participation, and then we are missing the bigger, the larger good, because within 6 months before an issue is decided by court, we have forgone revenue that was already projected to provide service delivery. So in the short run, we can be happy as citizens that the court is on our side with minimum taxation. But what does this mean for the poor roads that I have seen as saying they're poor roads? So I guess my question would be, do we need a balance then to say, as opposed to always fighting the taxes, can we as citizens agree, what are we getting from this kind of ring fencing? So if we have agreed that we are going to tax the informal sector, can Nixon and Treasury tell me that I will have water next to my kibanda? Kwa sababu there is no reason for me paying your tax and then I get someone to collect my garbage. I have to buy water. So I think the conversation, we should use the opportunity, the finance bill opportunity to improve service deliveries, to say, let us do 50-50. Tutalipa hiyo ushuru, lakini what are we monitoring within the year? Water would have come to Seasons Road where I live, so that the mama mbogas will be able to get water. That will essentially also reduce healthcare budget. So even the health budget will reduce. So I think the government also needs to look and see that the taxes they are pushing for, what is driving this push to tell KRA to increase more taxes? It's because of more expenditure. Where is this expenditure going? Only 17% of Kenyans are employed by this government directly as civil servants, but they take more than 50% of our budget. So me, who's not employed by this government, I am paying for my healthcare, I am paying for my children's school fees, you're taxing me to take care of 17% of people, you're giving them allowances that they and COTU have refused to reduce because they are saying we need allowances. What is important to us as a country? An allowance or strengthen public services. Because if you ask me as a parent of 4 children, I will tell you, I would rather forfeit 10,000 as a per diem, as a government official, but be sure that my child can go to Kasarani Primary, because there are 4. When in a term wakienda Kasarani Primary, I've saved 50K that I'm paying somewhere else. They are going to Kasarani Dispensary. So that 10,000 of the allowance will not hold so much motivation for me if the government can demonstrate that they will provide services. And remember then, if you strengthen public services more than taking care of these civil servants, so to speak, you're also addressing the issues of equity, because how many people really can benefit from these allowances? Lastly, allow me to speak to what Nixon and I think Irene had mentioned, that for a short time the people in formal employment got a tax reprieve. It was for a short time, yes. We were only few people who got it. How many people in formal employment in Kenya? So again, we need to look at some of those measures that government is taking. Is it looking at our economy? When you say our economy is predominantly an informal economy, then you're saying in terms of addressing COVID-19, I am giving tax reprieve. You're giving it to 17 people. Your majority are on this side. If you were to give the people who are living with disabilities, the women, because there are the few vulnerable groups that government highlighted, how many people are they able to reach with those simple cash transfers? So I think that the better thing for government to do to motivate taxpayers to pay is strengthen public services, because it will have a larger reach than the small pockets of support we are trying to offer. Not that we do not appreciate them, we appreciate them. But you saw how government gave us that reprieve for almost half a year. Then they came and said, no. KRA is saying they are losing this much. They have lost this much in 6 months. I don't know whether the same government does not look at how much they are losing on corruption, on Anglo-leasing, and so many other cases that they have not addressed. So government is very sensitive on issues that touch on their revenue, because it will be what will pay for their parks, but they are not very quick and sensitive to issues that affect me and you. So I think it's for citizens to push that sensitivity to revenue should not be one-sided, but should address both sides of taxpayers in Kenya. Thank you.
Asante sana. Thanks, my co-panelists, Irene. So, Risha, quickly, I think I'll do more of a repeat, maybe with a bit of tax angle on them. Number one is public participation, especially on the finance bills, finance acts, more so laws touching on tax. In most cases, we usually put out public notices. Maybe it might not have as a wide reach as everybody would like, but we always endeavor to have it hosted in our website. We do it in the newspaper as required. I've also seen National Treasury do the same, asking for comments on matters touching tax. I've also seen ISPAC do the same. I'm not a member of LSK, and maybe Irene will advise me whether LSK does the same. So they always invite people to send memoranda and comments on certain bills. I know the last one I remember was on the double tax treaty. Is it between Kenya and Ireland? Yes, that was put up by National Treasury so that people can make comments because the draft was already available. So those are the avenues that the citizenry have to make sure that their voices are heard. We actually into already the financial finance, how do I call it? The budget making process is actually on. And I think within no time you'll get also an invite for citizens to send comments. And I believe comments sent by KRA to KRA or to the National Treasury, I might not speak for the legislature because I don't know how they do their process. But for KRA and the National Treasury, any comment you send on how the budget making process can be made better or the tax laws can be made better, definitely you'll get a response. If it is taken in, you don't need another response anyway. If it is not taken in or there's an adjustment, you'll always get a response telling you we didn't do this because of 1, 2, 3. It's already addressed through another means, or there was a better proposal and we think it still addresses the same issue, or we feel this is not the right time maybe to do it, but we are still looking at it. So make sure you follow up. If you don't get a response, you can always visit KRA officers and the National Treasury for those responses. But we should take our rightful place in shaping policy making. Then there's this issue of tax avoidance, tax evasion. From where we stand as revenue authorities, actually to us there's a very thin line between avoidance and evasion. In the current world, you can't say I want to avoid tax. The only thing, as I put it as an academician, is that we have tax incentives. You can use tax incentives to reduce the taxes payable because the incentives are specifically provided for in law. Let me use an example of the people, we call it people living with disability, they're abled differently. I think that's a better word. They have an incentive in law that they get up to 150,000 per month exemption. So if you use that to reduce the taxes payable and you are rightfully in that category, then there's no harm. The problem comes in when people want to have temporary kind of disability and take advantage. Now it's actually taking advantage of the system. Then it's actually tax evasion. That's why I say there's a very thin line between avoidance and evasion. All of us remember in the global arena, we've had issues of transfer pricing, treaty shopping, and people just moving income around because of the differentials in tax rates and tax regimes in different countries to ensure they pay as low as possible. And you know, in most of those jurisdictions, the issue was not brought to the fore by the KRA of those countries. Those who remember the cases of Starbucks, people actually went to the street saying, you are not our stars, we want our bucks, we want our money. And that was by the citizens. And then the Senate picked it up for purposes of inquiries and investigations. So if we also take our rightful places, actually paying tax is no longer a legal matter. It has actually crossed to the moral side of it. Because if you are making money, for example, and you are not paying tax, you are not paying your rightful share, remember you are using roads and other social amenities provided by the government that has been paid by others who might not be making as much. And what happens? The society continue to be unequal. it increases inequality, and you will not see it easy. What will happen? Because the others you feel have not made as much, and you have a lot, you might need to start putting a fence around your home, so your cost goes up. You need to have private security, your cost goes up. So if you don't pay your rightful share, it's not that you are going to sit easy. Actually, you continue paying more money. That if you are paying your rightful share, the government will take care of it. So in a progressive society, all of us are aware of our civic duties in terms of paying tax, and that will go a long way in reducing our costs generally, and the cost of living. I like a point that Irene has mentioned. I don't know whether it's Irene or the other Irene on my right. There's nothing like illegal activity for tax purposes. In tax, whether you are doing illegal or illegal, we still tax it. The legal or the legality side of it can be handled by the other government agencies. So if you are involved in corruption, or you are involved in trafficking, or those illegal materials, when Nixon comes and brought us here, they will ask you to pay your 30%. Whether you'll be prosecuted and taken to court because of criminal activities, that is another matter. This debate, we can only carry it forward. We need to continue with this debate on the issues on whether taxes collected are put to good use. And I'm happy that this audience acknowledges that we cannot be collecting taxes and following up the same taxes. And our constitution know that. The constitutional makers knew that. And that's why they put up those oversight bodies. We have the Senate, we have the Parliament, we have the Office of the Auditor General, we have the EACC, who are supposed to, ensure that whatever monies that have gone to the consolidated funds are put to good use. Taxing rich more than the poor. I know it's a long debate, but as KRA, we mentioned that we are continuously looking at expanding the tax base. There's been a lot of complaint on you go to the same source that has been paying money. If it is, for example, companies that have been involved in manufacturing of maybe some of those, how do we call it, drinks, every year we seem to be adding tax to the same companies or the same people, while we know that there are a number of other sectors that we have not touched before. We are aware of that, and that's why you see in the recent past, we try to show up a turnover tax to try and reach as many as possible. We brought into the fore the other day a digital service tax, so that we are able to collect tax that has not been collected before, but these are people who are also earning income from our jurisdiction. Non-residents have not been paying anything, but they are earning from Kenya. So that's a new tax. We even have a new office known as Premier Tax Office. I don't know how many people have heard of it. PTO. So if you walk into KRA corridors and you see PTO, don't say, please turn over. It is a Premier Tax Office. That is a tax office dedicated for, let me call it the wealthy. We want to give them specific attention just to ensure that all of us contribute our rightful share, to the tax net. And many other incentives that, other initiatives, that we've not mentioned, including ensuring that we do audits, we do investigations. We cannot reach everyone, but I'm sure that those initiatives that we've taken has gone along, and you see KRA is now meeting their target month-on-month basis. And that is a good sign. The moment KRA meets its target, there's what we economists call the signal effect. There's confidence in the economy. You attract FDI. The citizens can now do business knowing that the economy is waking up, and that's a good sign. And we'll do all that, within our power, of course, legally. You remember our Commissioner General, FCPA, Gibimburu, always tells us, we don't collect more and we don't collect less from any of our taxpayers. So with that, Risha, I know we've spoken a lot. Maybe allow us to leave it at that, and then we pick up maybe more questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was, for me, so insightful. I was definitely scribbling lots of notes, and it was great to get the questions and hear from all of you guys. I'm actually wondering, because we are really over time. Actually, I know we started a little bit late, but it is 12:30, and we had kind of committed to end at 12. So maybe Melania, to you, are you seeing lots of very eager hands up, or is this a good place to potentially call it a close? Melania or Sarah or James in the room, can you help me out with that? Sorry, Melania, James, Sarah?
Check.
Somebody, can you respond to me?
Okay, my name is Maresia Alo, and mine is just an observation. Regionally, we have MOUs such as Intra-Africa Trade and AFTA, and the major goal is to lift tax incentive. Yet locally, we are being forced to pay, or rather, it's our responsibility to pay tax. So I'm wondering if regionally the goal is to lift tax incentives, why are we now being put on the limelight to pay tax? How can we harness the environment for business people? Thank you.
My question is, I wanted to ask, yesterday there was a report released by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics in conjunction with the Ministry of Finance, and it touched on betting. Many Kenyans consider betting as a source of revenue. I don't know, in terms of perhaps views, if you perhaps captured any particular views on Kenyans who think that betting is indeed a source of revenue, and what can you say about betting in Kenya and revenue and business? Thank you.
I'm Arcadius. As the taxman has said, there is no illegal businesses. So I think sometimes it's happening. Yes. I met some of the group, very many people in this country. So I think I can speak without this. Okay. So I think it's good for now. Okay. I have met some people when on my line of duty. So it happened that I met this prostitute, and they say they are willing to pay taxes. And no one. So as you have said that there's no illegal businesses. Yeah. How much are we intending to collect from them? Because they're willing to pay, but you still render the business illegal. I think if we can utilize their area of working, I think we can increase our taxes and the services. Yeah.
Sorry, Melania or Sarah, whoever is going around with the mic, can I just understand how many more hands you're seeing up in the room? I do, and I'd like, yeah. Can I get a response on that?
I'm not seeing any hands up right now, so I think we'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So can I ask my amazing panel? You guys have been fantastic. I've learned so much. Can I ask you to take really 1.5 minutes to close? I think we've talked a lot, and please address the last two questions that were raised as you're doing, if it's relevant to you, please. Thank you so much. Let's go maybe, yeah, okay, go in whatever order you feel comfortable with. Maybe we should go in the reverse from last time. So Nixon, you could go first.
So, thank you. I think that now, ladies before men. So, Meresia, thank you for this very good question on AFTAF and such initiatives trying to lift tax incentives. And as well, we are as Kenya, we are giving incentives. So there seems to be two pulling or opposing forces. But what is happening if you look at the global tax arena, there is something under base erosion and profit shifting. Under BEPS action, it should be 6, on harmful tax practices. Incentives are very good, yes, but there are certain incentives that countries can come up with which are harmful. They perpetuate base erosion. So they can be exploited by multinationals to ensure they pay as low tax as possible. And in transfer pricing and base erosion, we talk of income being made in a place without substance, because you've introduced a regime that encourages such kind of thing. But if an incentive is backed up by physical production, tangible assets, or even employees being present doing the work, then we don't consider that to be harmful. There are certain regimes we call maybe royalty regimes, where all you need is just to register a regime in an area, and you get 0% tax rate. And the royalty item most likely was researched somewhere else. Those are the regimes that the global economy is trying to get rid of. But where there's tangible production, tangible work being done in a jurisdiction, then if you give incentives, then it's past production. It encourages people to invest. Then betting in Kenya, I know it is it's something that is known to all of us. We've heard of the investors and the goal and the double chances of this world. Yes, it might be a source of income to the young men, but tax has a certain basis. And you remember I said that we tax an income. Betting has not been recognized generally in tax principles as a source of income because of the uncertainties that is involved. However, because the government is trying to balance ensuring that it is not harmful to the society, they also collect revenue, because if there are people who are harmed in the process of betting, remember it's the same government that will try to rehabilitate the same people. So how do we get money to ensure that that is done? And that's why you see there's a withholding tax on betting, there's a gaming tax, there's also, of course, the betting companies also pay their duties, because they're in business. But for the investors, there's some income. There's an income, yes, let me say in quotes, but that income is generally not taxable the way we tax other incomes. What the government did is to come up with a withholding tax on what you have earned from that initiative, but you will not be required to file another return. Thank you so much, my brother, for giving us a proposal on how to enhance our tax base. I think it's a discussion that we can move forward, and I'm happy that people are willing to pay. All we need is to give them a platform so that they can come and pay. But it is easy. iTax, is online. So if, for example, these people know they have made some income, si lazima hata kuje nimjue. What they need to do is go to iTax, say business income, as we all file our returns, and they pay their fair share of tax. Whether they have paid the correct amount or not, now you can leave that to us. Remember, in Kenya, we apply the voluntary compliance mechanism. You earn the income, come forward, declare. If you don't declare, then now KRA takes the other corrective mechanisms to ensure that you've paid your rightful share. Thank you. And I think as I conclude, because I'm sure this is final, thank you so much for Twaweza and NTA for organizing this forum. It's insightful. This research will be important to us. I'll give it to our policy makers so that they can, push this discussion and ensure that tax system is simplified. We can collect more tax, and we even resolve more issues, especially the ones where people have mentioned, like they have not interacted with the KRA. We are wondering where are they. So we need initiatives to ensure that we reach such people. Thank you.
Thank you. It has also been a very
Thank you.
informative session for me. In closing, I just have two comments. One is, I think, the approach that the Revenue Authority has taken, and there's been attempts now, I don't know how far that has gone, but to already start taxpayer education from the lowest level of schooling. I think that is what will give us a culture first of tax paying, and then understanding then you need to demand. So I'm seeing that it's a long-term plan, but will give us results because of the gap we have seen as civil society players, that when you now call for citizens to hold government to account, they do not remember that they had paid. But I think when you have a generation that has understood that you are taxing, so you expect something, so they'll be able not to tolerate as much as we have tolerated corruption as the current generation. So I'm looking forward really to see the results of that. It looks long term, but I think it's something in the right direction. The second one is for us as citizens and as voters and people that vote. I would want us to have a shift the same way politicians see elections as very crucial to them. Particularly now, everyone inviting a politician to your meetings, most of them at the constituency level. So if we also as taxpayers can start looking at the finance bill time as very crucial. So as politicians concentrate on the electioneering, the taxpayers concentrate on the finance bill and the revenue raising, then we'd be able to add value to the process. But when we come, as we've been coming to the budget and saying, give us more for allocation for health. When you ask for allocation for health, it means these guys will tax us more. So I think we need to focus and work more closely to sharpen our negotiating skills and our lobbying and advocacy skills as taxpayers to be able to get as much benefit from the finance bill discussions as the politicians do during elections. Otherwise, it's been a delight conversing with all of us. And I'm also happy as civil society that will pick this piece of research and see greater places to engage with the Revenue Authority together with other duty bearers. Asanteni.
Okay. Hello? Yeah. Okay, so I'd like, as I close, I don't think any of the last questions I have comment on. I think Nixon has addressed substantially. So as I close, I think I have one comment and one expectation. So first is to thank Twaweza for the process. I feel like it's, initially it looks long term or will take quite a bit of time. But I am impressed with the time that it has taken, and that we're able to see really very interesting, very interesting information come out of it. So perhaps what my comment will be going forward, or just as a closing, is we need to see more tax transparency and more tax accountability. I think that is the thing that has kept coming up every other section of that research. So the tax transparency, I feel like we see most of it, because if you go, whenever you go to the KRA page, you'll hear that, or you'll read that we collected this amount of taxes this year, which was more than we had collected the past years. There's that information. But what doesn't come up is the accountability aspect of it. Then how are those taxes actually being used? What are we seeing on the ground? Are we seeing the collection as reported translate into services on the ground, which is not visible? So I think there's need for more accountability on our taxes, and I say this as both civil society representative as well as a citizen, because I do pay taxes. So from my perspective as a citizen, I'd like to see more of that taxes that I pay translate into services, yeah? And then expectation will be, just to add on what Irina said, of course we'll use this for advocacy, but I'd like to see also this research or analysis, data collection, translate into policy. What is KRA going to do on some of these issues that have been raised? They are quite pertinent, and they are touching mostly on the revenue collection body, as well as Parliament on oversight issues, and also accountability aspect, then how are we going to advocate for the things that we are saying? This is what citizens are saying, and this is what we need to see on the ground actually happen. So I'd like to see that come up, and I think that's something that I'll aggressively be looking out for from both KRA and as well as government, and also civil society advocacy on use of some of these resource materials that we produce. Otherwise, it has been a real pleasure being sitting among the very best panelists I've ever been under or among, and it's good to have engaged with you all. Thank you very much.
So I would like to clap. Thank you, all of you, so much. I keep saying it, but I think there was so much richness in this conversation. I think there's a really nice call for KRA and CSOs to work together. How can we help in kind of ensuring participation is happening better, not tokenistically? I don't want to try and sort of summarize, but I think just to respond quickly to Irene, your last point about, how are we going to kind of use these findings in some sense, and of course we don't feel that's the responsibility of just COESA and all of that, or an NTA, but I think definitely we'll be looking to speak to our partners NTA and see how we can actually kind of push some of both the data, but also some of the conversation that's happened today into some of the right spaces for advocacy. So I think with that, let me not, I'm sure you're also tired of my voice, but it's been really, really great to be able to join you and learn so much. And I just want to say thank you so much, all of you, especially the panelists, for being with us. I think you gave us great insight, but also to all of you online who persevered, and in the room for really hanging out with us and talking about tax issues for 3 hours. That's a long time, and and I think it was engaging throughout. So thank you, and have a lovely afternoon. Maybe I can hand back to Melania or James or Sarah in the room over there just to close us out.
My name is Nyawera from African Parliamentarians Network Against Corruption. So mine is just to convey sincere apologies from Mheshimiwa Shakil Shabir, our chairman. He joined us very early. He would have been delighted to be part of us, but sadly, he was joining us from Egypt. There was a network outage. He's been trying to join online, and he's been unable. So his sincere apologies. I sure will share more insights from this meeting and the reports with him.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I did speak to him actually on the dot of 9. He was with us, so I completely appreciate that, and thank you so much for letting us know. We'll make sure to send him the reports and a summary of the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Risha. Yeah, Mheshimiwa was actually on the clock. We are really sad, and it's unfortunate that we had that tech issue, but tunashukuru sana, and the plan is actually this is just the beginning. The essence is that to have more engagement, more interaction. I know Susan there will be having further discussion, Irene and Aboke also, and I'm sure Dixon. The plan is, to further engage with this, take a deep dive with the data. So I think, Risha, with that, we say thank you so much. And there is actually lunch available, so we'll send you photos. So not to worry. So I think for that we can say officially we have closed the session for today, but the discussion is still live online. Please tweet. Please forward it to as many people as possible. So we will try to do our best to make the engagement more effective. We will not be informing, because that is what people are saying, that normally most of the engagement is they are being informed of what happened. They are not being a part and parcel of the discussion. So I think with that, asanteni sana. I think lunch, Sarah will tell us where the lunch is, or where the logistics of the lunch. So yes, Sarah.
So for me, to also thank you very much for making the time. And as we end, we're going to have our lunch down there. So as we go down the stairs on your left, yes, that is where the lunch will be served, and all of us are welcome. Please don't go without having your lunch, right? Thank you once again.
Biashara iko gumu bana. It's too much now. Hata ni kama sasa kila mtu anaenda astray.
Hakuna pesa. Kama machungwa kama hii ukiendea, sasa kama hii yangu iko na siku 4. Unauza kama 500 mnakula inaisha. Sasa hata siku ya kurudi kwa soko hakuna kitu.
Biashara ndio sasa iko chini kabisa. Chini kabisa, na ndio inatuma serikali ionekane kama hakuna kitu watu wanafanya juu watu wako na njaa. Mtu akikalia kazi kama hii uuze 200, unga ni 100 na kitu, mafuta ya tawa lita ni 100 na kitu, na umeuza 200, unaona hazigawiki.
Biashara imekuwa ngumu sana. Mafuta imepanda, watu hawaonekani. Juu hata biashara ichafukuliwa. Ujue magari wamefungua tufanya kazi paka utapepa nani?
Biashara yenyewe hakuna, pesa haionekani. Kila kitu imekuwa magumu kabisa. Hata tumeshindwa tutaelekea Kenya hii inaelekea wapi?
Ekonomi ya Kenya haiendi vizuri. Juu kisaka kujua haiendi vizuri, mtu ya chini kabisa analia sana.
Vijana wanaradarada. Huwezi toka na simu hapa ufike kama 10 steps kama hiyo simu haijaenda.
Uchumi imesorota kabisa. Kama pesa sisi raia haitufikii, inaenda wapi? Si ni kumaanisha hao wenyewe wanaweka kwa mfuko zao.
Ningependa kuambia serikali hao wafanyikazi wake, hao watu wa juu, hao hata vitu zikipanda wananga stress juu wako na pesa.
Mimi uchumi haunifurahishi. Maana ushuru ambao natoanga hautumiki vizuri kama vile inavyohitajika. Kama tunalipa ushuru kweli, tupate dawa kwa hospitali kwa sababu tunalipa ushuru. Tupate maji masafi, tupate umeme na kadhalika.
Kulipa ushuru ni muhimu kwa sababu serikali tulizaliwa tukipata lazima utoe tax. Hata kwa Bible inajulikana hivyo. Lakini tax pande yangu kwa bodaboda ama pande ingine naona inatuvurutia chini.
Kwanza ningependelea hii Kenya kwanza. Hii mambo ushuru wasimamishe kwanza. Ushuru imetudhuru mali kwingi sana.
Sioni. Sasa unatoa iende wapi? Ni kukula utakula mani ushuru utatoa. Sasa kama nauza 500, alafu nitatoa nini sasa? Tukule, tusaidie serikali tukose kukula.
Hawatumii vizuri. Ingefaa tusaidie sisi wananchi. Tupate umeme, tupate maji mazuri, tupate pia na dawa kwa hospitali.
Mimi naona serikali ya Kenya inatufanyia kazi. Sana sana ukienda kama mahospitali unahudumiwa.
Mafuta iko juu. Sasa unaona kama hizi food tunatoa nyumbani. Sasa bei yenye tulikuwa tunatoa nayo nyumbani before hatutoi nayo tena, imepanda, transport imepanda. Kila kitu imepanda.
I'm Dr. James Shira. I work for Twaweza East Africa. I'm the country lead. Twaweza is a regional organization that is in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. We have a program called Sauti za Wananchi that enables us to collect data from wananchi. And this, and mostly what we do is to sample across the country. And we normally poll on different topics, starting from COVID, taxation, livelihood, and such topics. As you are all aware that since 2020, the world with a pandemic which has really disrupted activities in so many sectors, of which doing business has not been as it was before. In 2020, things were not all that good because the COVID-19 restrictions were much more stricter compared to 2021. So citizens' expectation was that in 2021, of which we had a few waves. The government did quite well in terms of cushioning citizens against that. So our expectation is that things will improve, the way of doing business will normalize, and this is really was boosted by the presidential declaration during Mashujaa Day when the curfew was lifted. It was based on this experience that Twaweza, in collaboration with other stakeholders led by National Taxpayers Association, sat down and decided to collect information on how citizens perceive the current status of where the country is moving. We also wanted to understand citizens' perception on ways of doing business, which is also linked to taxation. So the survey that we conducted touched on 3 major issues, one of them being the way of doing business, how do citizens perceive it? The other issue is with regard to where the country is heading economically, how the government is handling the economy. The third issue is around taxation, how citizens are feeling in terms of
the way the tax is collected and how it is utilized. I'm Dr. James Shira. I work for Tweza East Africa. I'm the country lead. Tweza is